When I was 9 years old, my mother looked me straight in the eyes and said something I will never forget. "You're the reason my life got ruined." Then she walked away holding another man's hand and left me standing alone at a train station with my grandmother. I cried for hours that night, but years later, the same woman who abandoned me would knock on my door, begging me for help. And this time, I was the one who had the power to walk away. My name is Lily. I grew up in a quiet town on the outskirts of Boston with my mother, Sarah. When I was small, I remember warmth. I remember laughter. At least, I like to believe I do. But when my father was killed in a tragic construction accident, the light in our home didn't just dim. It went out. We spent years drowning in financial instability. Mom worked grueling double shifts at a local diner, her hands always smelling of grease and burnt coffee. Stress didn't just tire her. It turned her heart into stone. Every unpaid bill that arrived in the mail made her sharper, angrier. Soon, every minor inconvenience in her life was somehow my fault. Then, everything shifted. My mother started dating Richard, a wealthy businessman who carried the scent of expensive cologne and entitlement. He owned luxury high-rises across the city and drove cars so sleek they felt out of place on our gravel driveway. The moment Richard entered our lives, my mother's soul became obsessed with a shimmer of gold. She began wearing designer labels we couldn't afford, altering her face with makeup and expensive treatments, desperately trying to erase the pore from her skin. But in her new, polished life, there was one glaring flaw that didn't fit the aesthetic. Me. Richard's disdain for children wasn't a secret. It was a cold, hard fact. Every time I walked into a room, the air would freeze, and his plastic smile would vanish. One night, while I was getting a glass of water, I heard his voice cutting through the silence of the hallway. "If you want this relationship and this lifestyle to work, the kid has to go." I stood frozen outside their bedroom door, my heart hammering against my ribs. I waited for the explosion. I waited for my mother to scream that she would never choose a man over her own blood. Instead, she gave him the gift of her silence. A week later, my life was packed into 2 tattered suitcases. We stood at the train station where my grandmother was waiting on the platform, looking small and worried. I reached out, desperate, and grabbed my mother's hand. "Why am I going with Grandma? When are you coming to get me?" I asked, my voice trembling. She wouldn't even look at me. Her eyes were fixed on something in the distance, perhaps her future mansion. "It's only temporary, Lily," she lied. But even at that age, I could hear the finality in her voice. As the train whistle blew, I hugged her with every ounce of strength I had left. She stood there like a statue. She didn't even lift her arms to hold me back. Then, she leaned down and whispered the words that would haunt my dreams and fuel my fire for the next decade. "I finally have a chance to live the life I deserve." She turned on her heel and walked away. She didn't look back once. Not even a glance. Living with Grandma in her tiny, cramped apartment was a different kind of struggle. The heater rattled and failed during the brutal Boston winters, and there were nights I knew she was skipping dinner so I could have a full plate. But Grandma gave me something my mother never could: unconditional love. She was at every school play, every award ceremony, and every late-night study session. She constantly reminded me that my worth wasn't measured by the brand on my clothes or the balance in a bank account. Meanwhile, I watched my mother's life through the cold lens of social media. I saw the private jets, the diamond necklaces, and the polished family portraits with Richard. In every photo, she looked radiant. She looked perfect. And the most painful realization of all, she looked happier without me. As the years passed, the tears dried up. The hurt didn't disappear. It just changed form. It became a cold, hard ambition. I didn't just study. I obsessed. I worked 3 part-time jobs while maintaining a perfect GPA. I earned every scholarship available. When the day finally came that I received my acceptance letter to one of the most prestigious business universities in New York, Grandma didn't just smile. She cried. She held my face in her weathered hands and whispered, "You took your pain, Lily, and you turned it into power." After graduation, I didn't go to work for a big firm. I started small. I launched a skincare line from the kitchen of my tiny apartment, fueled by the idea of real beauty and healing. At first, the world was silent. Investors laughed. Competitors ignored me. But then one night I posted a video. I didn't just talk about products. I talked about resilience. I talked about skin that had survived the cold and hearts that had survived the dark. By morning, the world was finally listening. The orders didn't just come in, they exploded. I wasn't just a girl from a small town anymore. I was the architect of the life I deserved. Within 3 years, my brand became worth millions. Magazines started calling me America's youngest beauty CEO. And for the first time in my life, I finally felt successful. But fate wasn't finished with me yet. Because one rainy evening, someone knocked on my office door. And when I looked up, I almost stopped breathing. It was my mother. She looked completely different. Older. Tired. Broken. Gone were the designer clothes and fake confidence. Now she looked nervous just standing in front of me. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she finally whispered, "Lily." Hearing my name from her felt strange. Almost unreal that I slowly stood up. "What are you doing here?" Tears instantly filled her eyes. Richard had lost most of his money after several failed investments. Their marriage collapsed shortly afterward, and apparently, the luxurious friends who once surrounded her disappeared too. Now she was alone. Completely alone. Then she looked around my office. The expensive furniture. The awards. The employees outside. Slowly, realization appeared on her face. "You built all this?" I nodded quietly. She started crying harder. "I'm so proud of you." Those words made me angry instantly. Proud? Where was that pride when I was abandoned at 9 years old? Where was that pride during birthdays she ignored? Where was that pride when Grandma struggled to raise me alone? For years I dreamed about this moment.
Imagine screaming at her.
Humiliating her. Making her feel the same pain she caused me. But strangely, looking at her now only made me feel empty. Then she said the real reason she came. "I need help." Of course. Not love. Not guilt. Help. She explained how she was drowning in debt. How nobody wanted to support her anymore. How she regretted everything. Then she grabbed my hands desperately. "Please give me another chance."
He sat her silently.
Part of me wanted revenge. But another part remembered something Grandma once told me. Hurt people often hurt others. So instead of yelling, I calmly asked her one question. "When you left me at that station, did you ever think about how scared I was?" My mother completely broke down crying. And for the first time in my life, I saw genuine regret in her eyes. Then I slowly pulled my hands away. "I forgive you," I said quietly. Her face filled with hope instantly. But then I continued. "That doesn't mean you can come back into my life like nothing happened." Her expression collapsed. I explained that forgiveness and trust were not the same thing. Some wounds heal, but the scars never disappear completely. Then I opened my purse and handed her a small envelope. Inside was enough money to cover her rent for 6 months. Not because she deserved it, but because Grandma raised me to have compassion. My mother cried uncontrollably. Before leaving, she whispered, "I don't deserve your kindness." And honestly, she was probably right. But as she walked out of my office, I realized something important. Success wasn't my revenge.
Peace was.
Sometimes the people who hurt us the most become the reason we grow stronger. And sometimes, forgiveness isn't about giving someone another chance. It's about finally freeing yourself from the pain they caused. So never let betrayal destroy your future, because one day, your success will speak louder than your suffering ever could.